gear seekers, I'm Nick. Today we're checking out this ridiculously over-engineered mATX board, the ASUS ROG X670E Crosshair Gene. But before we continue guys, make sure you're actually subscribed because YouTube is doing some really weird things at the moment, like unsubscribing people from the channel. Anyways, this video is not a review, it's just an overview so we can take a bit of a closer look at everything that's on this board and everything that comes in the box with a brand new board like this. And I gotta say, there's a lot to look at and there's a lot in the box, so let's dive in. All right, ladies and gents, let's take a look at the ROG Crosshair X670E Gene, this mATX beast. But first, what we need to do is get the motherboard out of the way so we can take a bit of a closer look at all of the things that come in the box with this brand new board. And there's a lot to look at, but yeah, come on, mate, get it out of the way. All right, first up, we've got this little card. It basically reads, "Get ready to rock the gaming world with ROG. As a member of the elite gaming community, it's time to level up with Armory Crate." I didn't even read that properly, but yeah, just install the RGB software. There's also this little lanyard here. I've actually seen lots of people use these in real life. There's also a bunch of stickers. Now, this may or may not be your cup of tea, but I know people have been saying lately that they love these stickers. So if you love them, use them. There's also the user guide. Now this will help you if you've built lots of PCs or if you've never built a PC before. There's lots of handy information in this guide. All right, let's pop open the left flap and see what we got here. First of all, we've got all the M.2 mounting things. Now these are screws, these are spare clips, as well as a spare thermal pad for the M.2 heatsink that's on this board. There's also this is a little front panel connector. Basically the idea behind this is you can plug all of your case wiring into this connector and then you plug this in as a single block into your motherboard, helping with cable management. There's also these wires here. This is for the true voltician. This is for monitoring all of the V-core voltages and everything if you're doing LN2 and extreme overclocking. I'll come back to this and talk about this a bit later in the video. There's also this RGB extension cable. Now this is used for the 4-pin 12-volt RGB, not addressable RGB on this board. There's also an included set of SATA or SATA cables for your 2.5-inch SSDs or your spinning rush drives. There's this little interesting device. Now this is like the DIMM.2 adapter that we've seen on ASUS boards in the past. However, this one supports PCIe Gen 5. There's also the True Voltician, as I mentioned. Now, basically the idea of this is you can use another PC to monitor V-core voltages and all the voltages if you're doing LN2 or extreme overclocking. I will come back to this properly, as well as a USB stick with all the drivers and everything you need to get your system up and running. You can actually use this if you format it for your Windows install media. There's also the Wi-Fi antenna for the built-in Wi-Fi 6E that's on this board. And lastly, there's a GPU support bracket to hold up that saggy old GPU. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at the ROG Crosshair X670E Gene. All right, here we go. We've got the front panel audio connector. There's also a bunch of other connectors for the wires for connecting up the True Voltician for monitoring if you are doing LN2 or extreme overclocking. There is 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB. There's some SATA or SATA ports. There's a USB 2.0 header and the front panel connector for all your lights and all your switches and all that jazz, and a PWM fan connector. If we look on the right hand side of the board, there's another USB 2.0 header, another PWM fan header, 2 more SATA ports for your 2.5-inch SSDs or your spinning rush drives, a right-angled USB 3.2 header, a PWM fan connector, a connector for front panel USB Type-C, a 6-pin PCIe power connector, the 24-pin power connector to send juice to your brand new X670E Gene. You've got a safe boot and a retry button if you're overclocking. You've got the flex key, which you can map. There's also the power button and a postcode LED screen. Along the top edge of the board, we've got 2 PWM fan headers, a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header, another PWM fan header, and 2 8-pin APS power connectors to send juice to your brand new Ryzen 7000 CPU. There's a single x16 PCIe Gen 5 slot at the top, and at the bottom there is a single x1 PCIe Gen 4 slot. Now, for the VRM layout, we're looking at a teamed 16 plus 2-phase digital VRM setup with 110 amp power stages, and as you can see, the heat sinks for the VRM layout here are completely ridiculous. They are solid as. This board features AMD's brand new AM5 socket, otherwise known as LGA1718, and you can see that the cooler mounting here is exactly the same as AM4. But let's take a look at the inside of the socket. What you need to do is push the lever down, pull it away, lift it up, and then you can lift the socket cover up that holds the CPU in, and we can take a little bit of a look inside that brand new LGA 1718 socket. If we flip the board over, you can see that there's not a lot going on back here. You can see the backplate for the CPU socket though. For the RAM compatibility, there's two DDR5 RAM slots on this board. It supports up to a total of 64 gigs of memory at 6400 mega transfers. It also supports AMD Expo and XMP profiles depending on the RAM modules that you use. Now, despite the size of this board, there's actually quite a lot of storage here. We'll pull the heatsink off here so you can see the first PCIe Gen 5 M.2 slot. It also has that new clip that we've seen on other boards, so from Asus's Z690 boards, we saw this. Basically, you can do it without a screw. There's also, we'll call it a DIMM.2 connector because it's similar to the DIMM.2 stuff that we've seen on other boards. And basically what this is it plugs into a slot next to the RAM slots and it holds two M.2 drives. If I pull the heatsink off here, you can see that there's a slot on the front side and the back side. The main difference being that the one on the front side with the heatsink with the heat pipes is a PCIe Gen 5 M.2 slot. And if we flip this card over, you'll notice there's a PCIe Gen 4 M.2 slot on the back. Now, to differentiate between the two different types of slots, you'll notice that the Gen 5 slot has a square key. But if we take a closer look at the Gen 4 slot, it has a round key, and that's just the quickest way to differentiate what you're looking at if you haven't seen a Gen 5 M.2 slot. The way this goes into the board is it kind of works like a RAM module where it lines up with those two clips on each end, and then you can drop the whole card into the slot and it does sit in line with your RAM. Now, this is the Voltition that I was talking about before. Basically what this is this will allow you to monitor certain voltages by either plugging it into a USB header on the motherboard, or you can use a USB cable and another PC to monitor everything. Now, the way this would attach was either with this right angled connector or the one on the face of the board. And the point of this, again, is to monitor voltages and whatnot if you are doing extreme overclocking with liquid nitrogen. The board also features this new button push latch system to open up the top PCIe slot. And this is actually good because that can get very, very fiddly. For rear I/O, we've got a clear CMOS button, a BIOS flashback button. There's also a PS2 keyboard / mouse connector. For extreme overclocking, you'll want to be using this. There's also a whole bunch of USB Type A ports. There's 40 gigabit USB Type C, which is actually USB 4.0. There's 3 ports in total. One of them's only 10 gigabit. There's also 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, the Wi-Fi antenna connectors for the built-in Wi-Fi 6E, and full 7.1 digital surround sound with optical and speed of output with an integrated I/O shield. Alright ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this first look and overview of the brand new Asus ROG Crosshair X670E Gene, an mATX beast designed for LN2 overclocking and just to be the most ridiculously over-engineered mATX board for these new Ryzen 7000 processors. Now, in terms of the features here, we're actually seeing quite a lot in such a small form factor. We are missing out on a couple things, but given the type of board this is, we'll let it slide because it's only got 2 DIMM slots, which is okay. And we actually find this a lot on boards that are designed for LN2 overclocking. if I'm being honest, and if money wasn't an object, I'd say that this is one of the best mATX boards that we've ever seen without me going into review territory, just because of the feature set and the fact that this has a high-end chipset. But because money is an object, and if you're interested in buying this ridiculously over-engineered mATX board, they're going for around 599 US dollars, or around, wait for it, 1,069 Australian dollars at the time of filming this video. Absolutely bonkers for mATX, but I gotta say, with boards like this, mATX is back, baby, and it's back in a big, big way. Obviously, we're gonna be building with this thing very soon. I'm gonna build something kind of ridiculous and overkill with this, so make sure you're subscribed and all that jazz and all the things that YouTubers tell you to do. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, and we definitely had a bit of a seek today. Thanks for watching.